Well, good evening, everyone, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to get to do this talk today. And I asked Warren earlier how much time I had, and he said, take as much time as you'd like. So I'll be talking for the next 4 hours about the stuff I love to do, which is making apps for kids. But then I realized that you guys are all armed with stones. So I need to be careful about that and keep it reasonable. So I'm Connie Bossert, and I'm the co-founder of Fair Lady Media. And I'll be talking today about how to eke out a living on the App Store making kids apps. And I don't consider myself to be an App Store expert at all. But we've been doing this for almost 8 years now, and we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and we've had some good days and we've had some bad days. And we've learned so much, and I just wanted to share a few of the lessons we've learned along the way. Some of these things are things that you might already know. Some of these things are things you can relate to. And then hopefully I'll share a nugget or two of something that is new to you. So during my presentation, I'm also going to highlight 10 lessons that we have learned along the way. And these lessons are things that may or may not apply to you, but it's things that we sort of looked back on a particular situation and said, oh, you know, that's what we learned from that particular moment. So I'll start off by a little bit about myself. I went to Florida State University and got a degree in psychology. Then I went to Penn State University. I earned a doctoral degree in educational psychology. And my specializations were in learning with technology, learning and study strategies, and statistics, which now I'm finding with marketing is really coming in handy, that statistics part. Then after that, I was an instructional designer and a college professor. I also have 2 beautiful girls, and I serve as a volunteer frequently at their schools. So I work with kids a lot. And during those times, I have witnessed what I sort of like to think of as magical moments, when kids sort of have this aha experience that they are learning something new, or that they get excited, like maybe they just get motivated about something that they weren't motivated about before. And those are the moments that I live for, both as a parent and then also when I'm working with kids. And I think that's what got me into this field in the first place, and that's what has kept me going throughout my career working with kids. So what does that look like, and how has that formed my philosophy of teaching and learning? Well, I learned a lot in graduate school, and then I learned a lot becoming a parent, and over that time, it really comes down to something pretty simple. And I'll tell you one thing, it isn't this, okay? That to me is not what teaching and learning is about. That's not what is exciting about teaching kids. For me, the best way to teach children is to enrich their lives. And we all, I think, intuitively know what this looks like. You can do research on this as much as you want, but I think many times we know what this looks like. We can see it when it's happening and look and say, wow, that's something that's magical. This child's life is being enriched right now. And we have to remember that children are our primary customers, and that our jobs is to give them something that's going to enrich a little bit of their lives. And so let me show you what that looks like from my perspective. I'm going to show you some pictures of my kids, because I got to do that. You know, I did leave my ego with someone else, but I can't leave my kids out of the slides. So here are some of the things that, to me, it looks like. It wasn't that math sheet. It's kids cooking in the kitchen, or in the background, my younger daughter playing the piano, or having them go on a boat ride, or interacting with nature, or painting on the back porch, or participating in a science fair, or redecorating their rooms. These are the things that are magical to kids, and these are the things that they remember. Or playing with daddy's toys while, with his tools while he's working on a project outside. Interacting with animals and pets, and learning how to do things for themselves. These are the things that, to me, are the educational moments with children. And I see them as a parent, and I can see this excitement that they have and how they talk about these experiences. And those are the things that sort of drive who I am as a person and who I am as a business person as well. So that was a little bit about myself. I'd like to now go on and talk a little bit about Fair Lady Media, our company. Our first app was released in December of 2008. We were then incorporated in August of 2009. We have 2 employees, just myself and my husband James. I do the illustration and then he does the coding, and then we sort of divide up all the other kind of business responsibilities, marketing and things like that. We're probably best known for our Grandma and Grandpa collection of apps. I'm interested here, as a show of hands, who's familiar with our Grandma and Grandpa apps? So actually quite a few of you. Yeah. So we have currently on the App Store 11 apps and 3 bundles. We do have 2 Android apps. They were published by another company, Noodle Cake Studios, through like a rev share agreement, sort of as a trial type of thing a couple of years ago. So that's what we currently have on the App Store. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our apps and our history of making apps. I think it'll put some things into context. Here are the 10 Grandma and Grandpa apps. Most people kind of know of us for these apps. But what most people don't know is that prior to making these 10 apps, which started in 2012, we made all these other apps. And they're no longer on the App Store because we changed our focus along the way. But these were all full-fledged apps that were out there, and we were doing things with them way before we ever conceived of the Grandma and Grandpa apps. And we started off, our first app was called, whoopsie, no problem. Our first app was called Whack-A-Mole, which is right there. And it was a little mole whacking game, and it had other animals in it. It's actually Whack-A-Mole, Whack-A-Mole, like a whole bunch of animals in it. Okay, so Whack-A-Mole was out on the App Store, and we launched it December 2008. And some really interesting things happened with that app that taught us our first few lessons for Fair Lady Media. It got out on the App Store, and we're getting maybe $8 a day from this app. And we're like, wow, that project was sort of a big fail. But then my husband did a little bit of research, and he found out we were kind of collecting player data. We're getting like thousands and thousands of players that were playing our app, but we weren't actually getting any downloads on the App Store. It turned out that somebody had sort of hacked our app and put it onto a site where people could download it for free. And so my husband was a little annoyed, but he very politely contacted the person who had done this. He found out kind of where it had gone, and he contacted the person and he said, hey, we're just this couple and we're trying to make an app and make a little living off of it on the side. Would you mind removing this from your website? Well, the hacker wrote back this belligerent reply about how everything digital should be free, and we are money hungry and we shouldn't be trying to make money off of something we created in a digital space. Well, my husband went and he just posted this conversation on his blog. Next thing you know, we had like hundreds of people participating in this blog discussion. It was like programmers versus hackers. And at the time there was this website, Dig. I don't know if you all are familiar with Dig, but people could go in and dig a blog discussion, and then it would move up the charts in Dig. Well, we just went up the charts in Dig, and we were on the front page of Dig, which at the time was getting like millions of page views. So we just suddenly one day said, I know, let's just turn our app for free while we've got all this great publicity. So we turned our app for free. It rocketed to the top of the charts. We had every category. We were the #1 app. And within a very short period of time, we had 680,000 downloads. And at the time, that was really big for the App Store. This was back in the early days. So we were very excited about this, but there was no way to monetize yet. There were no in-app purchases. There was no ad networks. There was nothing that we could do to monetize. And until a company called AdMob approached us and said, hey, would you like to pilot this idea we have about running ads in apps? And so we said, sure. And we ended up working with them and then ending up getting some ad revenue from that. That really kicked off our whole business. We immediately started making a couple more apps, and we got real excited about the ad revenue side of things. Unfortunately, the name Whack-A-Mole was surprisingly close to a trademarked name, Whack-A-Mole. And so when our app got to the top of the charts, a well-known toy company contacted us and said, no, you guys need to remove this. We have this trademark for Whack-A-Mole, and it's very similar to Whack-A-Mole. So after discussion with a lawyer and whatnot, he thought we had a good case, but it was going to cost way too much money to work that out. So we had to change the name of our app, and we had 48 hours in which to come up with a new name for our app. So we ended up renaming it Spazzle. I don't know why, but that was the new name of the app. And then later we came out with Spazzle 2, which is this one, Spazzle Gold, which is that one. And then we had like little kids apps that had like the kid version of the same little guy in the apps. And we just sort of went from there. And I think that that was a real powerful experience for us to kind of have that whole start. Everything was going great, but then we had these hiccups that we had to very quickly adapt to. During that time also, people were getting really excited about this new app store thing. And so we decided to start picking up some contract work as well. We kind of had gotten our feet wet with making some apps. And so we also made these apps that you see here on the bottom. We made a Curious George app, we made a Sesame Street app. That's the monster at the end of this book. We were the developers on that. We had like a subcontract agreement for that. We did a little Angels app. Much more recently, we did this one, The Night of the Living Dead, which Barbara Chamberlain is very familiar with. So we did these other apps as contract work kind of on the side. So all in all, we've made over 40 apps in the last 8 years, just the two of us, my husband and I.
That's what I was going to ask. There's almost 50 apps out
Yeah.
there. This is just the two of you.
Just the two of us, yeah.
Do you sleep and stuff, or?
Those
Barely.
kids, where are they?
Right, so, and we hired a couple of subcontractors in some of these projects down here to fill in some of the gaps. But other than that, this is all just sort of our original work.
You did the monster at the end of this book?
We did all the coding. They did the graphics and the voiceovers. We had the real voice of Grover. And we did all...
The first one? Second one?
The first one. Okay, so we learned a couple of really big lessons, and that brings me to my first life lesson, which is...
It's true.
When life deals you lemons, make lemonade. And so when we had a situation where someone hacked our app, we turned it free and we got some good publicity out of it. And so that was one really important lesson we needed to learn. And then the second big lesson we learned from all of this is that sometimes you need to be a chameleon. Sometimes when one thing isn't working, you need to very quickly adapt and do something else. So, and I'm going to show a lot about how we've had to change focus. We had to change from casual games to educational games. We had to do contract work to fill in the gaps between our game launches and things like that. So let's sort of look at how that played out historically. So the early days, I kind of think of the early days as being 2008 to 2010. That was that Whack-A-Mole, Spazzle era. The next era was sort of that 2010 to 2012. App Store Dreams, we were doing casual games, we did contract work. And then we started noticing that there's this crowded, it started to feel really crowded in the casual games space. And so that was when we did the change in focus to kids game. We also decided to phase out contract work at that time. So as we decided to phase out contract work and do focus on kids games, we decided that we needed to come up with a company philosophy. And for us, it was, we wanted to focus on outstanding quality. And from there, we started coming up with this idea for these grandma and grandpa apps. Well, why grandma and grandpa apps? People ask me this all the time. What made you choose grandma and grandpa? And so for us, it was about what is most important to us and how can we then pass that along through our apps. Is it making our apps fun? Is it making them educational? Is it making them appealing to parents and teachers, appealing to kids, using ethical methods? There's so many things that you could prioritize as a company. And we decided that we really wanted to focus on quality because a lot of those other things would fall into place. And so partly that was why we chose grandma and grandpa. We feel that parents oftentimes don't have a lot of time to spend quality time with their children. They're so busy keeping them fed and making sure that they have their homework done and making sure that they stay on their schedule. And teachers are focused on the curriculum. They're trying to make sure that the kids can all pass the test at the end of the school year. And they have a lot of other priorities that they need to focus on. But grandparents are often the ones that have the ability to focus on quality time with their grandchildren. They can provide those enriching life experiences. They can be loving and compassionate and patient coaches. And so for us, grandparents were sort of the perfect mascot for our apps based on sort of our philosophies. And our focus on quality also extends to our app development. We feel that the kids deserve outstanding illustrations, animations, and photographs, outstanding, music, sound effects, voiceovers. All of these things are things that kids deserve an outstanding level of quality with. And for me, that was the most important thing that we needed to focus on. And it all starts with a really solid game idea. I'll talk about that in a second, but I'll go to our third life lesson, which was focus on quality. And we feel that when you focus on quality, a lot of other things fall into place. One of the things that I've noticed since we've really focused on quality is that oftentimes the word quality comes up in both the questions and the answers that we ask ourselves as we're going through business. For example, will it improve the quality of this game to add ads to it? And you can just look at that and say, no, it's not going to increase the quality of the game. And so, no, we shouldn't do it. Well, how else could we increase revenue? And here quality comes in the answer. Well, maybe if we improve the quality of this game, it will be more likely to be featured by Apple, leading to more revenue. So a lot of times, the questions and answers include the word quality. So I said earlier that quality often starts with an outstanding game idea. And we have developed sort of a method for testing our game ideas. We ask ourselves 9 questions. Every time we consider a new game idea, we ask ourselves these 9 questions, and it very quickly eliminates a lot of the ideas that weren't worth pursuing. And so if we take the example of our most recent app, which is Camping with Grandpa, we can go through the list, and I can say, is it an original concept? Yes. Will it have unique content? Yes, there are hardly any other camping apps on the App Store for kids, and certainly not with a grandpa. And then, is it specific and focused enough to allow room for future apps? Is it a natural fit with hobbies and pastimes of grandparents? Will it have broad appeal? Does it have a great title? Is it educational in a real-life context? And then, is the topic blue ocean? Is it uncrowded? And then for the last one, will this app appeal year-round? This is one that Camping with Grandpa wasn't so great on, but we decided that, hey, 8 out of 9 is pretty good, and so we went ahead with that particular game idea. But when you have a specific list of questions like this, we have found that you can take up any game idea and hold it up to whatever metric you want to like this, and it can very quickly cause you to eliminate certain ideas and then select other ideas for your next app. I want to go back a little bit and talk about why are we doing all this anyway? Well, James and I, since we have been married, we have always had this dream. We wanted to have a small farm. We wanted to work from home. We wanted to own our own business. And we wanted to have just enough money to be able to pay the bills, have some financial security, maybe do a little traveling, enrich the lives of our kids. And so that was sort of the perspective that we were coming into all of this with. And prior to 2015, we were living in a neighborhood, not on a small farm. James was working full-time at NC State University, so he wasn't working from home. And we were doing Fair Lady Media as a side business. During that time, we were accomplishing the fourth goal, which was enough money, but we weren't doing anything for the other three. And then, last spring, we found this lovely piece of property in Wake County with good schools nearby. It was the perfect spot to have our nice little farm. And so we went ahead and took the plunge, bought the farm, and put up a sign, Fair Lady Farm, and said we're gonna pursue this dream. Then 9 days after closing on the property, we had a big life changer. James got unexpectedly laid off after 17 years of employment at NC State. We had doubled our mortgage and cut our income by 60%. So we suddenly had to seriously regroup and figure out, what are we going to do about Fair Lady Media? What are we going to do about paying our regular bills? And where will we go from here? So we had a big choice. On the one hand, we could get jobs. That would give us better security. It would give us, unfortunately, less time with our kids. We would risk diminishing Fair Lady Media, and we would have to kind of give up that dream that we were working towards. Or we could go all in with Fair Lady Media, and this would give us no job security, but it would give us more time with the kids. We would risk losing our farm because the app store business is certainly there's no guarantees. But we would be following the dream. So what do you think we did?
Follow the dream.
Yeah, of course, man. So we went all in. And that brings me to my lesson 4. Consider going all in, because it has transformed the way we do business, because we are relying so heavily on it. Now that we are both working full-time for Fair Lady Media with no other income whatsoever, in order to pay the bills, it has been tremendously useful for the sake of the business, because we make our decisions much more carefully and much more strategically. So, how have we done? This was just last year. How have we done since then? Well, we started off by setting some need-based goals. And I'm going to tell you guys all of this financial stuff, not because, just because I think it's interesting, really. And just because I think that there's some important lessons here. So we decided that we needed to just figure out, what do we need at the very base minimum to pay our bills. Like, we were looking at mortgage, health insurance, gas, groceries, and bills. I mean, that was it. Nothing extra. So we knew that we needed, from Fair Lady Media, in our case, we live in a county where it's not as expensive as living in Cupertino or somewhere like that. So we needed $10,000 per month gross from Fair Lady Media. But we weren't making that. We were only making $5,000 to $6,000 per month. And so when we looked at how many apps we were making per year, we knew that we were going to need to double that. So the only way that we were going to get by would be to double the number of apps we were producing. And we also, this is kind of hard to see because it's real dim, but we decided that we weren't going to count on any launches for revenue. We wanted to count on the tails of our apps. So basically, you took a model where, let's just say you have an app that's making $33 a day. That app is making $1,000 a month. If you had 10 of those apps, then you should be able to make $10,000 a month, right? Just stacking those tails without any guarantees from features or things like that. That was the model that we decided to use, because it was a conservative way of looking at our apps. So then based on that, we set our Fair Lady Media goals. And our first Fair Lady Media goal was we had to increase our Apple revenue by 20%. That was the only reasonable amount that we could do. We wanted to streamline our development to go to 4 app launches per year. That's a lot for 2 people to accomplish. We also wanted to increase our exposure. We wanted to maintain our high quality standards, focus on ROI, reduce our expenditures, and acquire contract work to make up the deficit while we were getting to the place that we needed to be. So, looking back after having made these goals last year, that brings me to my next lesson, which is setting SMART goals. Goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. You've probably heard this before, it's kind of business speak, but the reason that I put it this way is that out of all the goals that we set last year when James got laid off and we had to regroup like this, the 2 that have been most valuable for us were increasing our Apple revenue by 20% and developing 4 apps per year. We have been able to consistently measure our progress on those. After each quarter, we could say, are we 20% above, and have we made our first app? And then quarter 2, we could do the same thing. We had to make some really big sacrifices on a personal end in order to achieve this. It was going to be like nothing. No satellite TV, no vacations, no spending money, no home repairs, no furniture. We had to sell our car. We sold an extra washer dryer. We had this pool table that was in the house that we bought. We had to temporarily carry credit card debt. We knew we were going to have very long hours and that this would potentially stress our work and personal relationships. But I'll tell you the thing that bothered me the most, and that was this one right here. No music lessons. And you might be wondering why. But I will show you. Look at that face and say, I'm sorry, sweetie, we can't do any more piano lessons. Both of my girls are wonderful musicians, and they both love music. And it broke my heart that we weren't going to be able to afford piano lessons for them anymore. The thought was so upsetting to me that I was about willing to just abandon our dreams and go get a day job and do whatever I needed to do. But I decided instead to swallow my pride, and I scheduled a lunch with my mother-in-law, and I explained our situation, and she very generously agreed to pay for 6 months of piano lessons until we could get ourselves on our feet. And that brings me to our next lesson, which is lesson 6, ask for help when you need it. I think sometimes people don't ask for help because we have to then acknowledge that we are unable to do something ourselves. But sometimes you just have to suck it up, swallow your pride, and go ask somebody for help. The other lesson that I learned from this is one that has to do with tenacity. And I'm going to show you for the next lesson. This is a picture of me holding on to my dreams with tenacity. And I want you to imagine what this photo might look like. And here it is. All right. So you have to hold on to those dreams as best that you can in order to accomplish those goals. So speaking of accomplishing goals, we now had those goals in place. We had decided to go all in. We were ready to do what was necessary. We made the sacrifices, and so now, by golly, we're going to accomplish those goals. So here are the ways that we have accomplished those goals in the past year. First is we needed to determine our revenue sources, what were going to be our primary revenue sources, have an eye for ROI, that's something that we've had to do all year long, streamline our development, manage our expenses, and analyze our data. And I'm going to talk about each one of these in turn. First is determining your revenue sources. There's a number of possible ways to bring in revenue for your company, and we've realized that a really great thing for us is to determine those revenue sources first, before you begin any development at all. If you wait, you're going to mess up your development later. So for example, if you think you're going to be making money from bundles, you need to be planning to make a lot of apps. If you want to be making money from contract work, you're going to need to be doing things differently than if you were making money from your app sales. Another thing that we do a little bit differently when we are determining revenue sources, we treat revenue from launches separately from revenue from tails. Because launches, there are no guarantees. We really focus on those tails of our distributions. And then we also treat bundles as a separate source of income too, because those the bundles are, a very different return on investment. An app that takes 3 months to develop is very different from just putting together a bundle that takes a weekend to put together. So while we phased out contract work, we are now, again, we decided, okay, now we're going to have to start looking at contract work again as well. So that was another source of revenue for us. In the past, we had done some ad revenue, but we decided that probably this year, we didn't want to put ads on kids' games. So we decided to focus on these four up here. Okay, return on investment. I'm sure that many of you have seen negative ROI over the past few years. For us, that has been things like unfeatured apps, especially those that took longer than 3 months to develop, website banner ads, social media ads, unfeatured updates, unadvertised sales. All of those have had negative ROI. We have had positive ROI though, and I'm going to show you some charts of how these have affected our revenue. Front page featured apps, obviously, localization of metadata, consulting and contract work, advertised free sales, bundles, and having a fat tail on your apps. And then we have unknown too, things that we're still exploring, things like advertising your bundles, app store optimization, search ads, things like that.
Sorry, are those things you haven't tried, or things?
These are things we're currently researching. Yeah, we're still researching them, and we've had mixed results, and we're trying to find those answers. I really want to crack this nut in particular. Where is it? Well, advertising bundles. I think that there's a potential there for positive ROI if the bundle is priced right and your click-through rate is right. I just feel like we could maybe make those two meet. So I'd like to now, since we're talking about return on investment, that brings me to our 7th lesson, which was make every penny count towards the goals of your business. Now, my brother called me a couple days ago and he said, "Hey, Connie, I just want your input on something. I've been thinking I want to go to the Game Developers Conference. And we've been to GDC a number of times. And he's like, it's such a great conference. I just come back so inspired and everything. And he said, but it's going to cost me like $5,000 to go out. By the time I pay for the airfare and all the costs, it's going to cost me $5,000. And I said to him, now that we're really focused, I said, okay, let me ask you 3 questions, and then you tell me if you still want to go to the Game Developers Conference. 1, what are your company goals for 2017? 2, how will this conference help you achieve those goals? And then 3, could that money have been spent elsewhere to help you achieve those goals? And as soon as I put it that way, he was like, wow, no, I really don't want to go to the Game Developers Conference. There's so many other things I could do instead to help me achieve my goals for 2017. Now, development. I mentioned earlier that we were going to have to make 4 apps per year. That's a crazy fast development cycle. So how do you do that without sacrificing quality? We needed to focus on efficiency, limit our app updates, do this 3-month cycle. So here's our development process, and I'm just going to show it to you so that I can show you what we changed to make it more efficient. So we currently do this thing where we choose an idea, we draw it on paper, design meetings, design notes, mock-ups, graphics, code, testing, device conversion, beta test, submit, marketing. You know, it's a pretty straightforward development cycle. But the problem was, I love to create graphics. That's the thing I like to do best. James likes to do this one, develop code. All these other things are just sort of the annoying other parts of making our apps. And so what we found was, historically, we would immediately want to jump, like, we'd come up with a game idea, and I'd be like, okay, I'll go make some graphics. And then I'd send them to you, what do you think of these graphics? And he would immediately start writing code. And so we had to not do that. You can't do that if you're doing this in 3 months' time. And so the main thing that we changed with our process, we kept the process pretty much the same, but right here, we did a checkpoint. We had to both sign off and say, this is the app we are developing. When we had it drawn on paper, it needs to be completely done. We need to be committed, and we both physically sign the paper. And by doing that, it forced us to do all of our iterating on paper instead of through graphics and through the code development process. And then we had another checkpoint right here going from mock-ups to graphics, where basically when I send him a mock-up of something, he needs to sign off and say, yes, this is technically feasible to do. And so by having that checkpoint in there, we were able to greatly speed up our development cycle. And this past year, we have been able to achieve, we actually did 5 apps in this past year rather than 4. Along the way, while you're doing this development process, you also have to be managing your expenses. You all are familiar with all these expenses, but this is something that, you know, we just had become hyper aware of and hyper sensitive to because we were all in for the company. Then you get to the point where you're ready to get onto the App Store. It's time for launch. You know, you do your localizing, you do your app description, your marketing, and here's a point at which timing becomes really important. I don't know if you all have had this happen to you, but sometimes your app doesn't get the launch that it could have had simply due to timing. We have launched apps at times of year, for example, if your app doesn't have the new iOS features that are just coming out, you shouldn't be launching it on the week that, you know, iOS 10 is coming out. Things like that. And those are things that you can control. iOS updates, holidays, national events, things like that. Factors you can't control are things like competitors. What are they going to come out with? And we had some really bad luck with this. We came out with an app called Grandma Loves Bugs, and it came out the same week as Bugs and Buttons 2, which was like a really big app back then. Then we had Grandma in Space, and Sego Mini Space Explorer came out the same week. And then we had Music with Grandma, and Idoki's Easy Music app came out, which was Editor's Choice that week. So we've had times when this timing thing just happens, and those are things that you just can't prevent, and we just, you know, you kind of chalk those off as experience. When it does work, it's fantastic. I love to see an app on the front page of the App Store. It's great, and sometimes, you know, it's just a wonderful experience to see all this happen. In this case, with Camping with Grandpa, we got the second icon on the front page. We had a banner, but often it does not work out that way. And so this is how that feels. You put in so much work, and you work just as hard on the app that fails as the app that did well. And sometimes those moments of disappointment can be crushing. Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. And I always thought that was kind of an interesting quote. And like, do you keep going to get out, or do you just keep going through hell? You know, I thought it was an interesting quote, but it always sort of reminds me of that quote when we're going through these moments. This is how we cope, though. We do 4 things. 1 is we're always ready to change. 2 is we remember to have a long-term focus. 3, we focus on quality. And 4, we examine our historical data. So now from this point on, I'm going to be talking all about our data, showing all of our numbers. Okay, so be ready to change. Here is how we have changed over the last 8 years. These are our revenue numbers, and you can see the sources of revenue. So in the beginning, we were mostly doing these other apps, not grandma, grandpa apps, contract work, and ad revenue, right? That was 2009. 2010, we were pretty much doing the same thing. 2011, a much larger chunk of contract work because people were getting really excited about putting apps on the App Store. 2012, this is when we first introduced our first Grandma and Grandpa app, and as you can see that's taken over the majority of our revenue over time. All in all, this stuff all totaled together is just under $1 million in revenue over the period of 8 years, which wasn't bad, it was great when Fair Lady Media was a side business. But now that we're both all in full time, we need to be doing better than that. Unfortunately, this is right when the market is now tougher than it ever was before. So we've really had to be ready to change and adapt, and we will continue to be ready to change and adapt. Whatever the market is showing us we need to do, we will try to do. Another way that we've had to be ready to change is in our development environment. We started off with core animation, then we went to Cocos 2D, then we went to SpriteKit with Objective-C, then we went to Unity, SpriteKit, and Swift. My illustration environment has been Adobe Illustrator all along, but the reason I'm using Illustrator is that it's vector graphics. They can be resized to any screen size. Now, I also mentioned a long-term perspective. This has been really important for us because when you look over time at all of our apps, even though we've had some apps that have had sort of abysmal launches in the beginning, over time they've ended up doing reasonably well. Our very first app, Grandma's Garden, launched in April of 2012. I think it maybe got new and noteworthy, but it had really not very much of a feature on the App Store, and it was a very modest launch. But over time, it's been now out for 54 months, and so over time, geez, that's $77,000. And we didn't take that long to make that app, and so it's kind of worth it. It feels worth it now, looking back on it. And so having that long-term perspective is really helpful. Another thing I'd like to highlight is that focus on quality has been really consistent across our apps. We really make sure that we're doing apps that people are going to be giving 4 and 5 stars to. And that has worked out, I think, pretty well for us. We've gotten a lot of recognition through some of the more reputable sites giving us, accolades and honors and things like that. And I think that helps with publicity. And as a small developer, we don't have as many opportunities for big marketing kinds of things. We don't have a big marketing budget. And so this kind of visibility is really good for us. Another thing I said that we did to learn to cope with disappointment is to learn from history. These graphs are a little bit different. Instead of focusing on all of our revenue, this is just the Grandma Grandpa apps. And so I can see year 1, this is just Grandma's Garden. And then year 2, right at the end of year 1, we introduced Grandpa's Workshop. And these years are from April to March, so that you can sort of see the Grandma Grandpa series developing over time. And I like the fact that there's an upward trend here. However, on this bottom graph, this is where I think the App Store is a little bit alarming right now. So we had these 5 apps that we developed over these years, and then it was right here that James got laid off. And we very quickly made 5 more apps. See that? Boom, 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 boom. Well, we doubled the number of our apps in this very short amount of time. So if our theory of stacking tails worked, we should have twice as many sales here as we did here. But do we? No. They're stacking, those tails are skinnier now. And that's something that's been really sort of alarming to us. We hadn't expected that, that over a 1 year time frame, that the tails would start stacking so much lower. One thing I should note though is that this does not include bundles, and I'm going to show you the graph later that includes bundles, and it makes up the deficit a little bit on that. Okay, so what has worked for us in terms of bringing in revenue? One is localizing. Specifically, metadata is what we have localized. We have not localized our entire apps. Determining the best price point, having free sales, and then making a lot of apps so that we can cross-promote. So with regard to localization, I did a nice little experiment on this. We had not had any of our apps localized at all because they are very specific to literacy skills. They have a lot of literacy skills. Plus, the grandma and grandpa characters do a lot of sort of acting, and it'd be very difficult to translate those into other languages. So what we did was we decided to take our newest app at the zoo with grandma and grandpa. We translated it into 99 languages for $523. Then we compared that to our previous launched app, Camping with Grandpa. So 14 days of Camping with Grandpa, we only had $418 worth of non-English sales. And then for Zoo, we got 1,000 more non-English speaking sales. And what I did was I just looked at the English speaking countries and divided it out that way. So we had, and that was at a cost of $500. So basically, in the first 14 days, we made $500 back just because we had localized the metadata of our newest app. So it would depend on your numbers, but it's certainly worth it to consider localization. And then another area where we saw a revenue increase was with price point, and I apologize, these are coming out dimmer on the projector. But the numbers are all down here. We basically, originally we had all of our apps at 99 cents, and then we bumped them to $1.99, and then this is the bump going from $1.99 to $2.99. We had a 19% decrease in downloads, but a 14.7% increase in revenue, which overall made up for the lesser downloads. There is a trade-off though, because you're losing some of your customers. So that's something to be aware of as well. And then another area where we've seen positive impact on our revenue is for doing free sales. And I mentioned this during the panel presentation earlier. So here's a free sale of Grandma's Preschool. In this case, we had a week-long sale. And then during that time, we increased our customer base by 34,000. Typically, our sales are anywhere from like 30 to 90,000 downloads. And then all of our other apps here, so this is not including Grandma's Preschool, all of our other apps saw a 36% increase in sales. And that fattened tail actually will go for a number of weeks after we've had a big boost in sales. So that cross-promotion is really valuable. And then also during launches, there's a lot of cross-promotion. So here's the launch of At the Zoo with Grandma and Grandpa, and there's a 123% increase in sales of our other apps right after the launch of our newest app. And so coming out with more apps more frequently gives you this bump more often, and so it can fatten that tail at the end of your distribution. And then sometimes we combine those two approaches, a free sale followed by a launch. And when you do that, you see a nice big bump similarly. In this case, Camping with Grandpa, and it was 114% increase in sales. Another area where we've seen positive ROI and increases in revenue is with our bundles. The great thing about bundles is that they're low risk, a low investment of time. We currently have 2 medium bundles and 1 large bundle, and it's a consistent source of revenue for us. In the past 2 years alone, 60,000 of our revenue has been just from bundles, and that's a great return on investment. We didn't have to do anything to create those bundles. It's just putting them together over the course of a weekend. And we're hoping that they will then be a substitute for thicker tails. And I'll show you that graph that I had up earlier, which was this one on the top. This is our grandma and grandpa app revenue without bundles, and then this is with bundles. And so it just thickens the distribution in between those launches. And that brings me to the next lesson, which is more is better. Offering more apps to your customer has some benefits. There's a little bit of something for everyone. You can cross-promote. If you have more launches, you have more opportunities for features. If you have more search terms, you can bring more people to your apps. And you can create bundles to increase your revenue. One thing to remember, though, as you're creating your app buffet, is to continue to stay focused on quality. You don't see, chicken McNuggets on the buffet. And I think that would detract from your collection of apps. Those are all sort of the measurable things that have impacted our revenue. There are also immeasurable things. For example, building a network, focusing on building a business rather than building an app, testing with real-life children. A lot of these things are things that have been hugely beneficial, but not measurable. And we have found that you don't need a huge team to make a great app. And I think that this is a lesson that maybe some larger companies could take away, is that you don't necessarily need 15 people to make an app. And then we've also discovered that QA is, we call it the necessary evil, because whenever we don't quality test well enough, we end up with bad reviews and just everything goes downhill from there. There's a few things that have not worked. Long production cycles, web banners, Facebook banners, paid reviews or other promotions. I'm sure that everyone in this room has gotten an email at some point from someone saying, hey, we will put your app on our website for a low fee of $375. And those things, we found that none of those things typically work. Also, price reduction sales. And this one we did a big test on this, and I'd like to share the results. We did this 10th app celebration and sale in October. We were launching our 10th app, and we wanted to make a big splash and do a sale, and we wanted to really sort of increase our customer base, and we wanted to have this opportunity to advertise our apps. We did social media, web banners, we did these top 10 lists, and posted them, and we did promo code giveaways, all kind of stuff. And we even got on the kids page, check out this feature. All 10 of our apps were featured on the kids page at once on the App Store. Amazing apps at 99 cents. We were thrilled. We were so excited. We were like, wow, this is great publicity. We're gonna do wonderful things with this. Unfortunately, it did not meet our expectations at all. We did have increases in App Store impressions, about 4,000 impressions per day per app from this. And we did have an 83% gain in downloads, but they weren't significant enough to offset the loss of revenue from the sale. So we had the apps at 66% off. We needed to triple our downloads to offset the cost, but we didn't. We only had an 83% gain. We ended up losing $1,000 that week, for nothing. So that was a really powerful lesson. I printed out, I have a whole report that I wrote up about this with all the charts and graphs and stuff. If you're interested, I'll put it on that back table so you all can take a look. That brings me to my 10th and final lesson, which is be a scientist. The lesson we've learned from all of this is that you have to be scientific in your approach to business. You have to use the numbers to help answer questions about the things that you can control, and then find out what has worked and what hasn't, and make changes and try again. You can learn about what's working and what's not working. There's a few things we're still trying to figure out. If any of you have answers on these, I would love to hear them. Keywords, App Store optimization, search ads, positive ROI on marketing outside the App Store, gaining honest App Store ratings from parents and teachers, and app updates, are they worth it? We've had a real mixed bag with that. Sometimes they're worth it, sometimes they're not. There's a few things we haven't yet attempted, like building a community of thousands of fans. We're so busy making apps that we have not had time to build a community. Full localization, it just seems like this huge ordeal to try and do that with our apps. Full expansion to non-iOS markets. We've done very little with Android. So these are things that we just haven't had an opportunity to do yet. And then also recording user actions in our apps. When the COPPA guidelines came out, we basically just said, you know what, we're not going to collect any user data at all, and we'll come up with a plan for that later. That's something that we haven't had a chance to reinvestigate. So just a quick review, our 10 lessons that we've learned. One is make lemonade when life deals you lemons. Be a chameleon, change and adapt to the market. Focus on quality. Consider going all in. Set smart goals. Ask for help. Hold onto your dreams with tenacity. Make every penny count. More is better. And be a scientist. But as a parting thought, to me, the most important thing is to enrich their lives. And so I would like to show you this one. This is when we were on a hike recently with my kids, and we saw these deer on the side of the trail, and the kids were so excited. They talked about this for weeks afterwards because they got so close. I'm sorry about the wobbly camera. I was trying to walk behind them. But it was amazing how close they got to these deer. And the whole rest of that trip, they were like, oh, we should have fed it some leaves. What do deer eat? And, why wasn't that deer afraid of me? And are people allowed to hunt deer in this forest? And they just got so excited about it. And I think that seeing kids get so excited about something, that's where those really powerful learning experiences are. And look at them, they're in awe about this deer that they can practically reach out and touch. Yeah, she's like, so that's my parting thought, is always think about how to enrich the lives of kids. Whenever you're making any kind of materials for kids, to me that's the most important thing, and I hope that you'll take that to heart. So I thank you for your time, and let's connect. Come talk to me at some point, and that's everything.
Connie, you are so brave. Oh my God. Can we have another round of applause for this?